Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 3 of the Veilcast. This is a vodcast dedicated to the upcoming MMORPG Camelot Unchained, and today we're talking about crafting, some crazy crafting. We're even going to show the batshit crazy video that's coming up. Joining me as always, Alistair and Velik, and also a guest, fellow guildmate, the crafting extraordinaire, the crafting guru himself, Chris. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good, and I'm not really crafting extraordinary. It's more crafting OCD and the spreadsheet master.
Crafting OCD. Well, it works. I'm not a huge crafter. I have a little bit of crafting, so I'm glad you're here to help us. Velik, Alistair, how you guys doing today?
Doing good, man. Doing great, doing great. When we were playing ESO, Chris was playing Excel spreadsheet online.
Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah,
those
pretty
spreadsheets
much.
are important.
That's right.
They were.
They were.
Now, we're going to show, there's the BSC video. It's like 40 minutes long, so obviously we can't show it all. But we're going to show a couple parts of it, things that really stand out, some interesting topics, of course. We're going to show those in just a bit. But before we jump in, I want to ask everybody, we'll go clockwise, Alistair, Chris, and then Velik. I just want to ask you guys, in general, how do you feel about crafting, and what are you maybe looking forward to or excited about for crafting in Camelot Unchained?
Well, to be honest, I have never been a super crafter in any game that I've played.
Casual.
I always do it.
That's an understatement.
Yeah, I always do it to a certain extent. But every time I've done it is because of community or because of min-maxing. If I didn't have to do it, I wouldn't. That's basically my approach. Yeah. However, I pay attention to it. I pay attention because the economy, how you acquire things in the game, makes a difference, right? Mm-hmm. So it makes a difference to your gameplay. Yeah, so even if I'm not doing, I have to know how it works because I want to help my friends do it, people who want to do it. So as I am more community-oriented when I play MMOs, I'm always focusing on the teamwork and organizing people and doing all that. So I can't completely avoid crafting. But seriously, done it, like to the point of OCD, like Chris? No, I have never done it. And but I look forward to.
I went a bit overboard.
You went overboard. Well, Chris, let me ask you, why do you go overboard then? What is it about crafting that you love so much? Why you dive into it?
There's a few things really. First, it's something that I haven't found in games since the last one I really went overboard in with crafting was Rhizome, which came out about a year before WoW came out. It was not really big in the US. It was mostly in Europe. But the crafting was almost as important as it's going to be in CU. Everything was crafted. There was a lot of PvE, but the mobs were dropping only materials. And there was a lot of combinations. So knowing all the combinations, being able to help people also, I go a lot overboard because I want everybody to be at their top in their crafting. That's what I did in ESO, which is researching all the components, all the recipes, and making sure everybody had their spreadsheets ready with all the recipes, the effects on them, the special crafting sets, everything. So it's mostly creation, and something I haven't found since EQ, it's recognition. I like being the go-to guy for one special craft. For example, as we said earlier, in EQ, I was the master potter. So it was a pain in the ass to get the materials and everything to make the pots. So a lot of people came to me to actually make them. I was known on my server to be the OCD one who actually was able to get it to the max level, because it was tens of thousands of combination to actually get to max level.
Right. So I mean, you actually got to make a name for yourself, and.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I mean, we talked about a little bit before how crafters used to be like endgame raiders, right? Top of the top, the best PvPers, the best crafters were like those people. They were like, holy cow, he's the best armor smith. And
exactly.
Yeah, I hope we have that as well. I mean, that's really awesome. Velik, what do you think? How do you feel about crafting?
Crafting in general or crafting in...
Well, yeah, in general, and what you maybe hope for Camelot Unchained. What do you hope to see?
Okay. Whereas it comes to crafting, I'm one of those people that I really like the concept of crafting, but I hate the implementation in almost every MMO. I really find it to be kind of lame. I'm of the opinion with crafting that either you go all out and you make crafting vital to the game, or you really might as well not even be bothering. You know, all these other games where you get most of your gear and even some of the top tier equipment and stuff from PvE encounters and drops. At that point, I don't even see the purpose of crafting anymore. You might as well just remove it from the game and do other things. So I'm really excited that Camelot Unchained is going the way that they're trying to, where they're really making crafting completely essential to the game. Because I think that's the only way you can really make an enjoyable crafting experience.
Yeah, what they have done in recent MMOs, mostly with crafting, is like Velik said, the drops come from, the best gear comes from another source, which is not crafting, but then you have your crafting to kind of augment your gear, right? So you have enchanting, so you put an enchanting on your cloak, and then you put a socket on that other item, so you can put a gem into it that will give you a little more strength or whatever it is that you need. And then you have the other profession who crafts the augments that you put on those lots so that's what WoW does. That's what Star Wars does. ESO has not gone that route. And in the beginning, crafting was more meaningful, but it's
sadly,
still kind of weird.
Sadly, it was the beginning. It was the promise of ESO that crafting would be the best way to get your gear. And about a week in, the PvP gear became the best one. And then crafting was once again just a staple. The only one that was at least a bit meaningful was the enchanting. But that was about it. The rest was pretty lame. Even the crafting sets with all their bonuses were not as good as the top PvP gear.
Right. What about, so I was just showing here on screen, I'll show it again. This is the webpage for Camelot Unchained here. You can go to the website, camelotunchained.com. This is under there, crafting BSC ideas, and it gives some, has the video, has some basic ideas, but there's a big part of it that talks about popcorn crafting. And what they're talking about is how there's going to be a dedicated crafter class. So everybody can't, you can't have a warrior and be the best crafter. You have to make a crafter to be the best. But what do you guys feel about popcorn crafting, where everybody can do a little bit? Is that important, or should it be more reliant on the crafters?
I think that's really an important part of the crafting system. I mean, I'm not the sort of person who is going to go and make a crafter and spend all of my time crafting. And honestly, from reading and watching the videos about it, I feel like in order to be one of those people and be one of the really high tier crafters, it's going to take one of the most hardcore players in the game to do this, to really commit to that in this game. But for me, I like crafting and I like being able to make some of my own stuff. So I think being able to go out and repair some of your equipment and, keep things at least maintained so that you're fighting ready, I think that's important.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that way you can keep doing it.
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think.
I agree with that. It has to be something that helps. You don't have to go to a crafter every time. It becomes a pain in the ass in the end. You have to be able to actually do something on your own, be self-reliant to some extent. But the way the gear depreciation goes is going to go in CU. You would need to go to a crafter almost every day to repair your gear. I think that would be a bit overboard, and it would be detrimental to the enjoyment of the game. So some popcorn crafting, to me, is a good thing, as long as it doesn't. It does supplement the rest of the crafting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that you hit the nail on the head. That's exactly what I was going to say in terms of. You can't go overboard with the concept. Okay, we're going to have a crafting-dependent economy, and that's how this game's going to work. But if you go, if you replace the NPC in other games that you click repair on by a player, that's a little bit too much, right? Because what if you don't find somebody to repair your gear? Now you're sitting at the city, and you can't go out and fight because your gear's broken, and you're not a crafter. and you can't find anybody to repair it, right? Maybe you
Right.
find a crafter, but he's not, you're super overpowered, crafted with a bunch of rare materials, and it
Yeah.
requires a high level crafter to repair. So it's not anybody who's going to do it, and then you just can't find it because it's like 10 in the morning, it's our day off, and you can't play because your gear's broken, right? So that's a little bit too much. The popcorn crafting gives you an opportunity to actually fix that and not get that too frustrated, because we can't go from the comfortable and convenient system that we have in current MMOs of repairing gear and everything to a completely no NPCs, nobody does anything except for crafter systems, because that's too much of a shock. It doesn't work.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like right now, like I can't fix my car really, but I can replace the windshield wipers, right? I can,
Yes,
do
you
little
can
things.
change a
Right?
tire.
Right,
Yeah,
I
you
can
change
do
a tire.
little things. Yeah,
Exactly.
and I agree with you. I mean, it's everybody can do a little bit to keep the game running, but to get that really awesome stuff. And remember, crafters are going to make all the stuff you use. It's not like other games where you can get good stuff from PvP or from dungeons, and then crafting stuff is kind of if this is what it is, right? Crafters should love this. Let me show. We're going to start with the video here, the BSC video. If you want to be a crafter, what it's going to be like. This gives us a little insight, kind of maybe what it's going to look like in the game.
The key element in understanding our crafting system, whether it is creating an item, whether it is mining or harvesting, is that we are starting from the premise that crafting is magic and magic is crafting. We are throwing out all the pretense of, oh, look, I can make this grand sword in just 15 seconds in the game by hammering on my little forge. We're throwing that out. It's silly. It makes no sense in these games anyway. Now, we all do it because it actually works, but it's kind of silly. So we're just tossing that out and starting with the premise that our crafters are essentially mages. Everything you do as a crafter, whether you're harvesting, whether you're gathering, whether you're mining, and especially when you're creating, is based around the concept of you controlling magic. And that is going to lead us down a very interesting path to how you are actually going to create these items, and I'm going to talk about that next. So I've given you a very basic overview of most of the elements of our crafting system. I've told you that crafting is magic. Now, how is this going to work in the real world? How is this going to work for the player who wants to play the game a little bit or who wants to craft a lot? How are we going to prevent runaway mudflation or inflation, for those who are not familiar with the term, in these games? Well, our way is very simple. We're going to use a combination of things. Knowing that crafters are magic can give you a hint that we may tie it to some kind of a mana pool or crafting pool. So you won't be able to simply sit there and craft and craft and craft 24/7. It means that guilds or farming groups who want to just feed a crafter material after material to generate large number of items, you won't be able to do that. There will be a limit to the number of items you can craft during the day. And remember what I said during the Kickstarter. Crafting each item is not going to be something you do instantaneously. And the more powerful items, the more expensive items, the rarer items will take a lot longer. It will take days.
So let's stop right there, right at the very end. He said something, a couple of interesting things that really stuck out to me. One, he said crafting is almost like magic, right? What is that all about? And two, he said stuff's going to take days, right? Now, he said, I think I cut him off right at the end. You can watch the whole thing on their website, but how it's not like you have to sit at your keyboard and like push a button for days on end. This is kind of like Eve, right? Velik, you played Eve. It sounds kind of like that system, right?
Yeah, more or less. I mean, in Eve, a little bit different. In Eve, you pretty much you pull up like your station where you have your crafting stuff set up at, and you tell it, all right, I'm using this material, this recipe, go ahead, craft it. And it says, okay, it's going to take 36 hours to produce. And then you go do something else. This sounds like a much more interactive system where they're really going to be having you, as you said, not doing that for 3 days to produce the item, but they want people to be able to play the class. And this is one of those areas where I really like the theory of where they're going, but I'm really kind of worried about how they're going to really make this feasible, because they want people to be able to play the class and play that as a crafter all the time and enjoy playing it. So you're going to make an item. It might take you a couple of days to make an expensive item, but you're going to be doing something, at least for a little while, to be having fun doing the crafting and messing with things. So it's going to be interesting to see how they make it more interactive, but obviously not interactive and take you 3 days of actually clicking a button, because that would just be ridiculous.
Right. Chris, how do you feel about stuff taking a long time?
I actually like that because it makes also rarity of the stuff, of the gear. So it plays also for those who like to play the market, who like to actually make a lot of money. That's not why I craft, but I know that a lot of crafters do that to make money. And this way, this way, crafting becomes significant. Making a powerful item becomes a real achievement in and by itself. So that's what makes it really interesting. And having it take days is not really a problem for me, because you have other activities while your Vox is working on your craft. For example, maybe you could go gathering, or go to a siege and do something with the siege engines you might have crafted before. Things like that. You might not have to sit at your Vox for 5 days, 6 days, a week. They said even some things might take weeks to craft for the biggest ones. So it takes planning, which is great, and it takes dedication, and that's really what I love.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's something we haven't really talked about is people who want to craft, and you have to make this class, a crafter class, but you're not stuck all day, every day like a slave in a building just churning out swords, right? If you want to start this crafting stuff, you want to go out, you're not as good of a fighter as the other fighting classes, but there's important stuff for you to do. You can build walls, you can build siege engines, you can repair this stuff. You're like almost like a support class who would buff and heal their allies. You're not doing damage, but you're important to the fight, right? So even people who maybe don't want to craft, maybe they just like siege weapons. They could make this class and do that.
Exactly. Yeah. So you can specialize. You probably will be able to specialize, and I wouldn't be surprised to see that. Specialize on siege building, specialize on armor crafting, specialize on actual stonework, building walls and stuff. I mean, the crafter is a class, so just like a warrior can use many weapons, and you can specialize on sword use, and maybe know a little bit of using a bow, and maybe a spear. The more you branch yourself with different weapons and stuff, the less you specialize, right? Mm-hmm. So the crafters are the same. They can do a little bit of everything, or they can really focus on some aspects and be useful like that. So the class has a lot of potential with this system that Mark described, and I think it's good that he made it into Magic, because then really you can have pretty much whatever system you want without breaking the lore, without being silly. Look at it, how can he craft this so fast? Or, why does it take so long to do this simple thing? With the whole magic concept that he explained in the video, I think we have a situation where they can come up with a system and make it work in the game in a way that is fun and balanced without having to limit their imagination to real life crafting, right? So that to me is great, because they can break up into phases. They can do whatever it takes for you, so that you're not 10 hours in front of your crafting station pressing a button, and also so that you're not completely like put it there and leave it and go do something else and don't even care about it. It has to have a balance, so it's not too secondary nor too grindy. So
it's silly if they're going to have something take a week to produce, to say that he's hammering away at it on an anvil. Oh, he's been hammering at that thing for 5 days.
Yeah, they have to make it interesting. They got to make it interesting too.
That and the fact that they said there will be cooperation between crafters. How can you say have 5 crafters banging on the same anvil on the same sword at the same time.
Right.
That would look silly. With the Vox, at least you have a good basis on the cooperation. The magic, maybe they can infuse, simply not work on the same Vox, but infuse magic in the Vox to help it go faster.
Right. Well, let's
Something
take a
like
look. We're talking about the Vox. Let's take a look. If you don't know what we're talking about, this is one of those BSC crazy ideas from Mark of what you're going to use, the tools for crafting. Let's take a look.
And here's where it starts to get a little bit crazy, a little bit nuts, a little bit fun. Now, what I'm going to tell you, it's not the most original idea I've ever had, because there are games that have used something similar, but we're kind of taking it to an entirely different level. That is the beginning of the BSC part. What I've said on the forums, the hint, the tease I gave, just a few weeks ago, the Vox Magus. Now, what is the Vox Magus? Well, in bad Latin, you can either call it the voice of the magician or the voice of the mage. What the Vox Magus is, it's your crafting station. And what I mean by your crafting station, I mean it's your crafting station. Anyone who crafts, everyone who crafts, has to have their own crafting station. What is this going to look like? Well, we're going to have some shots of it, some early concept work on it, and just think of it as the world's coolest pipe organ. You know what pipe organs are? You've seen them in cathedrals, you've seen them in movies, you see the guy with half a face going dun dun, that's what you see. So take a basic pipe organ with its stops, with its pedals, with its pipes, and think of that as the interface that all the crafters use for creating every item in the game. Except, remember what I said about magic. The pipe organ, of course, the Vox, is magical. So when I say you're creating items, that's exactly what you're doing. You're taking the raw materials, of course, and then shaping them. You are forcing them into a new form, and that's what happens at your crafting station. That's what happens at your Vox. So while you're there, what is it going to be like? Well, think of it like any other game. You start with a very small pipe organ. You start with something not very cool necessarily. It's a hint of what will come. But then as you progress as a crafter, as your skills level up, as you make more and more money from your crafting, because remember, my goal is that the crafters always make money. You will be able to expand your Vox. You're going to be able to make it cooler, neater, and it is going to ramp up with you, not just in appearance, but also in power, in performance. Because as you're pressing the dials, as you're changing things to make different power flow through the organ, and that item is created, it then flows outward. Think of a performance.
All right, so, all right, maybe my opinion doesn't count for as much because I'm not a hardcore crafter. This sounds ridiculous to me. A pipe organ, I'm making a sword, a two-handed giant sword like in Braveheart. It's gonna come out of a pipe organ. It's just gonna pop out of the thing.
There will be a nice soundtrack to it. It's gonna be and then so.
Where's my blacksmithing station? Where's the smoke and the coals and the fire and hitting the anvil? And I love that, right? Like pipe organ.
But you can have the same with magic.
You
can have the same with magic.
Beethoven just jamming out.
Yeah, Beethoven, and then
exactly.
Here's your chest plate. Here's your breastplate. Beethoven just made it. It's really cool.
I want a half mask. I want a half mask and play Phantom of the Opera.
Who likes? We have 4 people here, a bunch of people in chat. Who likes the visual of a? Let me show you what it looks like. Let's take a look. This is what we're talking about. This is the idea right here. Right? It looks kind of cool, right? I
actually loved it.
You loved it?
It's one of the things that actually hooked me on this because, for example, the thing you said, that the fire, the banging on the anvil, you can have, for example, the materials floating above the Vox and melting together, and the sword actually forming in front of your eyes, floating just above the Vox, and having. Crafters have been pretty neglected in most games in terms of visuals.
It's all interface interaction, right? Yeah.
Exactly. You can have a huge sword as a fighter. You can have a huge sword, a huge armor, bulky. You look a badass, and crafters just have a small hammer and hammer on an anvil.
They feel
This
inadequate
way,
with their
you can
little
actually
hammer.
look. Exactly.
Well,
That's just.
you-
I don't know.
just like-
It just looks silly.
That's true.
You start with a small organ, and then over time it develops. But
That is pretty
Exactly.
cool. I like the customization. Like I can imagine you're walking through town, right? And you turn a corner and there's this giant Vox Mage. You've never seen this thing so big.
Exactly.
It's huge. It looks amazing. And in the middle of it, there's like this spell going on and this cool thing. I guess that could be kind of cool, right? You can also take it around with you. You can
I
haul it
think the
around.
concept
Exactly,
of
and-
it, how it might look, it can be really cool. And I think it would be something that, I mean, people aren't going to necessarily sit around and really watch it long term, but somebody might stop and check that out and be like, that is really cool. Just like they do, fighters with their cool equipment, be like, oh, how do you get that equipment? That is awesome. You can see the crafter with his huge Vox Magus and be like, oh man, he's doing that. Though someone
Where did
in
you get
chat,
those crystals.
yeah, the crystals are pretty cool, but Hoodster in chat actually mentioned something a few minutes ago before we showed the video that I think is relevant to that, though. He was like, what is it going to be like? A bunch of Vox Mages just all up in town, all over the place. So that'll be interesting, too, to see how they're going to keep that from being like, that's your fort. There's like 10 guys over on the left with their Vox Mages just taking up all the space with their bright flashing colors.
You can work with each other, right? So, I mean, you could have 10 people with their own individual ones, but I imagine it would be more beneficial to have maybe 2 and 5 people working on each one. That sort of situation.
That's what they've been talking about, that there might be some Vox also for guilds, which means maybe you will need a special modification on your Vox to have other people working with it. But instead of having 10 Voxes bunched in a circle and working together, maybe just the crafters working on the same one, channeling, I don't know if it's magic, some magic through the same Vox instead of actually pulling their own Vox and working together that way.
I mean, it's definitely different. That's for sure.
Yeah,
It's a good point, and
the size of the organ doesn't matter. What matters is how you use it, right? But
Exactly.
I think that people are getting too hung up on this organ thing. It's an inspiration, guys. Like the pipe organ and everything. It's more of an inspiration of the concept. So you have, like if you have a keyboard and you have all these pipes and you're like, oh, if I press here, here, and there, I mix these materials. That's the concept of it. Because a piano is a very good way to explain how you can interact with this crafting station in a complex way, right? Yeah. And it requires skill to do it properly. And the rhythm with which you interact influences everything's speed and whatever you put into the Vox Mages. So that's an analogy. Don't get too hung up like, oh, it's going to look exactly like a pipe organ. It's going to be like the Notre Dame Church right here. No. It's an inspiration. It's the concept. So I like it. I think it's great. I think it's out of the box. It's BSC.
Looking at how the Vox Mages, how they said it's going to work, is actually where I was getting at earlier when I said that I feel like to be a high-end crafter in this game, you're going to have to be one of those really dedicated hardcore players to be one of the actual serious crafters. Because at another point in the video, they say that the Vox Mages is going to have an upkeep cost based on the size of it. So as you progress in your crafting, you're going to have a bigger and better Vox Mages because it'll look cooler. It's also going to be starting to get really expensive to upkeep. So you're going to have to invest time into keep crafting so you can afford your own Vox Mages. You might have to get help from your guild. And as Chris said, you're going to have people helping you out, organizing with you. All your buddies are going to get together sometimes to help you craft so you can put things out faster and everything. So it's going to take people that are really organized and really into the crafting, I think, to be not just to do crafting, but to do like that high end, really serious crafting.
I mean, that's the drive, right? I mean, that's Chris, you said it earlier. Crafters have really been neglected more and more and more as games have progressed further and further. They're basically, I mean, not worthless, not the people, but like being a crafter. That's why I don't craft. Why spend my time, all this energy?
Crafting was useless.
Yeah, I mean, you can get better gear from dungeons, better gear, and if you need a crafter, there's so many who can just do it instantly. Why bother?
Yeah.
Like,
The big problem is the isolation of crafting.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how complex it is, if it has little influence in the actual game, PvP, PvE, adventuring in general, then it's just a minigame. It doesn't matter how much it takes, how long it takes to master it. All that is, people are just going to grind it and they're going to do it. But if the influence of the items that you make and the things that you actually affect with your crafting are minor or secondary, then your crafting is just a minigame. And that's how people are going to see it. Oh, it's optional. Do it if you want to, but you don't have to. Some other person is going to do it, and then you just grab it from them, or you go and you buy, whatever you need. You don't need to craft yourself. But in this game, it's a completely different concept, right? It's the craft is, if you want to craft, you got to make the crafter class, and the RVR is crafting. Everything, there is no RVR without buildings to take. There is no RVR without sieges to attack, without weapons to fight. So you gotta first, crafters are gonna help build the structure, the game from the core, and that's the sandbox element that I think is the difference, right?
And you said something really cool.
And
real quick, I was just gonna say, Alistair,
yep.
you talked about how.
Yep.
Crafting was so singular, right? You go to some building, you look at a UI, that's all you're doing. You're by yourself. Just the fact that you can craft with other people, that's going to add such a social aspect, right? Isn't that? I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean,
that's one of the good things, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. For example, people see you on the street with a big Vox mages, like crafting this awesome sword, and
they
they're
just
like,
join
wow.
in.
Can I add you to friends, man? I might need a sword, and I'm gathering materials to make an epic sword here, and you seem to have what it takes to do it. So
Exactly.
that kind of stuff doesn't exist anymore, but this could bring it back, right?
And it really
That's
improves
also-
the social element. I mean, Hoodster just asked if having other people channeling into your Vox will help make things faster. And that's one of the things they actually mentioned in the video, that it could really actually help you put out epic items more quickly.
Yeah, because one of the go ahead, Chris. Go ahead.
Yeah, just that the Vox Magus again, the size of it and the fact that it's impressive brings back one of the things I talked in the beginning. It's the recognition. Mm-hmm. Somebody who puts out a huge Vox, it's a high level one. The guy who puts hours in that. That if you want the best item forged, you can ask this guy, because he'll be there. He has the means to do it. That's the recognition. That's what a lot of crafters, I think, are craving right now. It's recognition, knowing that you can actually make a difference for the players. You can actually build the best stuff, and you can be recognized.
That's one of the biggest things for me that I really like about this are the different recognition elements. The having someone's name, having the crafter's name on the item, having people know they got to come to you to get an item, and like having the player shops so people know where they got to go to get the items and stuff. Yeah. I think that's huge.
Exactly.
Well, let's take a look at that. Mark actually talks about the player shops and things like that a little bit. Let's check it out and see what he has to say.
During our Kickstarter, one of the things that I absolutely swore to you players that we wouldn't have was an auction house. I'm here to tell you, we still don't have an auction house. I have no intention of building an auction house for the game. Very clear about that. We need you as players of a realm and of a server to get to know your fellow players. We want you to sell to them directly. We want them to be looking out for you. Now, does this mean you're going to have to hunt through every nook and cranny of a city to find the guy selling the sword that you want? No, we want to be a little bit smarter than that. Oh, well, how about if we just allow people to set up their shops anywhere in a town square, for example, or even in a separate area where all you see are guys standing outside hawking their wares? No, we're not going to do that either. We've seen that before. And while that can work okay when there's not too many people, obviously we've all played games where you would walk into these areas and you can't move, or you're just engulfed by a cacophony of sounds and noises. We're not going to do that. We are going to set things up so players can have their own shops. We've been very clear about that. We also have a way of doing it. We think that's kind of clever, that will allow you to have your own shops in an area which will not be as crowded and not be as annoying to go through as in some other MMORPGs. Will this work perfectly? I don't know. It's different. It hasn't been, as far as I know, done in quite this manner, but we're going to give it a shot. If all goes well, we will stick with this plan. Again, no auction house. Only player-run shops, with the exception of some merchants, especially for the new players, in the main city. We will also allow guilds, of course, to have shops for themselves. We're not sold on the concept of guilds setting up shop, for example, in the main cities, because that could give them an advantage. But when they go out and found a town, or they go out and help found a town, will we let them set up shop there? Yes. That seems to be a very, fair thing to do. Now, as a player, let's say you're not in a guild. How are you going to compete with them? How are you going to attract attention? How are you going to sell your wares? That's going to happen mostly in the main cities, because the main cities are where the biggest shops are going to be. That's where the biggest areas for shops are going to be. And frankly, we expect a lot of the population to move through the city, if not on a daily basis, certainly often enough to make it fairly easy for you to at least possibly attract business. And then we will have, I hope, some interesting ways as well of making it easier for people to find you, or to find at least the kind of goods that they are looking for.
All right, so let's stop right there. There's a couple of things they talked about. Right at the very end, he talks about making ways for people to find you and find the stuff they're talking about, right? But then he also talks about how there's no centralized auction house. Okay, that's what we're used to in a lot of games like WoW or Guild Wars 2, these things where you go to NPC, they give you a list of everything, you buy it right there. He talks about there's not going to be that at all. You're going to have your own player-made shops. Now, I've had a couple of good and bad experiences. Going back to Ion, you could sit down on a stool and sell stuff, and people would click on you and buy stuff. That was pretty cool. Dark Age of Camelot, they didn't have a centralized auction house. There was like a whole zone where people would have houses, and you could go from house to house and buy stuff. But if you didn't want to run around, you could go to an NPC at the gate, and he would like tell you who had what. And you could actually pay an extra fee to buy it through him. So some good things, but also, I have to say, ESO, I hated their system. There's stuff all over the world. You have no idea who has what. It's such a pain in the butt. I literally play with no potions and no food because it's such a pain in the ass to go find that crap, right?
Yeah.
So this is all going to come down to how it
If
works.
it wasn't for Legend Gaming, I would play the same way.
Right,
Because we actually had stuff in the bank, and then we gave it out during events to our players. But if I didn't have the guild bank, I'd probably not have any consumables whatsoever, because just, I remember when this system came out in ESO, I was the guild leader of Vakindai, and it was a pain just to get a store. On the first week we didn't get a store, and then on the second week we got, and then on the third week we got outbid, and we had to wait the entire week just to grab it. It's just so lame, right? It was completely random. Whoever got there first and bid higher was gonna get it. It wasn't about organization, the biggest guilds, community achievements, nothing. It was just get there first, bid the NPC, and if your bid is the higher, awesome. You couldn't see other people's bids. You couldn't do anything. You had to guess. You had to dump a bunch of money there and hope for the best, right?
Chris, are you excited to have your own store?
I do actually. I'm really excited about that, but I have a couple reservations also, because how can you make it easy for clients to find the crafters without making an auction house? The problem is the auction house has driven the prices and the economy down in every game I've played. Mm-hmm. I know it's the rose-tainted glasses, but I remember fondly the Eastern Commonlands tunnel in EverQuest, where people were actually sitting and advertising their wares in the general chat, and people were actually talking, bartering for the prices, and asking the rest of the community for the prices. That's what I like, because that makes also playing the market harder. But those who actually are dedicated enough and hardcore enough in playing the market can do it still. But they have to work hard. Instead of having just to browse one tab in the auction house, they have to go to the crafters and check, depending on the regions, what the price are.
Yeah,
So
what the
that's
auction
what I
house does,
really would like to see.
you have one add-on that does that for you, right, on the auction house. And wow, that's how it is. You have an
Exactly.
add-on that pretty much takes whatever item you want, compares the prices, and says, "Oh, look, there is one here that is selling for much lower than normal. You buy it off and you sell it for the normal price, and you make a profit, right?" So there are add-ons that do that in WoW, for example, and that's boring. I mean, that's not cool. I think it must be
Exactly.
player oriented. It must be community oriented. But Mark said, I don't know how they're going to do it. To be honest, I'm puzzled, because he said there's going to be an area where you go shop for crafter stuff, where crafters can set up their shops. He said there's going to be something like that.
Yeah, like a bazaar kind of thing.
Yeah, like a bazaar. He said it's probably going to be in the main city in the video too. But he said it's
actually not in the main city.
not in the main
Because
city.
he said that he didn't want to have, like in some games that didn't have the auction house, a spam in the general chat the moment you enter the city, with also the lag coming from everybody browsing all the vendors at the same area. So he said he doesn't want that, but I don't know how you can prevent that if you don't have the auction house.
I had one idea while reviewing all these, because I had some of the same concerns. I really like the idea of getting away from the auction house, because having the stores really makes it more personal, and to me it boosts the community aspect of it. You have to know which crafters build things. You have to have eventually you have your crafter that makes your swords. He's your guy, your contact for swords. It's kind of like real life. You know a guy that makes things you like, and you go to him to get them. But I had the same concern. It's like, how do you put this in the city and, not have stalls everywhere, or have it so that even if you have them in stalls, where there's like sets places you can put up shop, how do people find it? And they go in there, there's 150 stalls. My idea on that was, what if they organized them by category? Because they said crafters are going to have to spend a lot of time specializing. So if you're a crafter that specializes in weapons, well, they have a weapons market area over here. Cut down a lag, and it makes it easier to find because all the weapons guys are over here, all the armor guys are over here, so on and so forth.
Well,
Yeah.
he
That's
talks
actually
about,
a great idea, yeah.
Well, I mean, we got to remember this game is going to be 95% open, right? There's some small like city where it's like a safe zone you can go to, but that's a tiny little part of the world. 95% of it is open. So your store, whatever it is, whether it's you sitting on a bench, whether it's a building, whether it's an NPC, you're going to be out in PvP selling stuff where people need this stuff. Are we going to be able to go in and like siege a city and like take their store, take their NPC? Now you work for me, you're selling my stuff, take your stuff that's on your auction house. Like, how that could be pretty intense too, right?
Yeah, there's a lot
that
of
would be
potential to
even
explore
a
there.
PvP objective. Cutting off, you want to weaken a guild, you cut off the supply line, you cut
Yeah.
them off from the market. The moment they can't sell anymore, they have to set up shop elsewhere. That weakens them. That weakens their ability to repair keeps, to have better equipment, etc. So that works too as a pure PvP combat objective that involves crafter in another way.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
and if they
darker
make
class.
it so the RVR doesn't flip too often, that there's a warning that oh my God, they're attacking this place, or they're going to attack. I know this place is under risk, so you can move your stuff out of it before they attack it, right? So there's a lot of potential to deal with that. How do you move the goods in a open PvP setting? You have to set up a shop on the battle frontier, so you got to get there. And traveling this game is not going to be, click, teleport to the keep. That this kind of stuff's not going to be in Camelot Unchained. So traveling actually takes time, and things have weight. There's encumbrance in this game, so your character gets slow if you are carrying too much. So how is he talks about setting up caravans. So how is it all going to work? There's a lot of potential for fun stuff and an entire RVR segment just based on crafting, stores, and transportation of goods. Not even counting taking castles.
Yeah, in chat, the Darker Clouds and a couple other people mentioned kind of going against this idea. Mentioned EVE Online and how they have like regional markets. They don't have like a single auction house, but they have regional markets that you have to go to. Kind of arguing for some of that having to transport the goods through dangerous zones and stuff does increase some of the it does help regulate the value, and it makes running the market kind of more challenging. And I do agree with that. I wanted to address that to kind of go against it a little bit, because I do think there will be some element of that in Camelot Unchained, in the RVR, because we might have the guild shops in the keeps, and you do need supplies that you have to ferry to the keeps to run siege and build buildings and all that kind of stuff. So I do think there will be an element of that. But EVE's also a much more sprawling game. I mean, it's a totally different concept. I mean, you have to jump over vast amounts of territory to really get to the next market. So I don't know that there would be room for something like that in this game, where you actually have like a regional market instead of auction house. And as I already said, well, they don't want auction houses, period. So
yeah, but you don't need a regional auction house or regional market. For example, you can have an NPC that lists what crafters are selling without listing the prices. And if you actually want to compare the prices, you have to go to the crafters. But you actually,
that's true.
At least you know who to go to, rather than having to shop for all the shops for one item. You can. It reminds me of your idea of putting different categories in different places. This way, you don't have to set them in different places, but you have, for example, an NPC at the entrance, at the gates of either player build city or the main city, that lists the crafters. When you set up shop, you decide on which category you want to be listed under, and then they tell you that this guy sells sword, this guy sells armors, but that you don't have the prices, and you actually have to make the effort to go to the vendors to see the prices and compare the prices.
I mean, the NPC could have a range, because again, we're going to have this huge map, but the NPC could have a zone, right? And if you're within that zone, that's that guy's job. He runs around, he knows everything that everybody's got, right? Well, if you go talk to him, maybe it costs you a gold to find out, hey, who has weapons in this area? He says, oh, this guy's got one. Then you go, well, what kind of weapons does he have? Well, give me another gold. I'll tell you what they got, right? So you're paying this little bit of tax because, I mean, we don't like it, but there's got to be gold sinks in the game.
Yeah.
So you pay this little bit of tax. You find out who has what, but he doesn't sell to you. He says they're over there, and then you go over and you buy it, and then it's up to you, right? So there are some ways we could work this, right? There's millions of ways, infinite ways. The thing for me is, as much as auction house kind of takes away some of that social aspect and it ruins the economy because everything's the cheapest, it's convenient, right? Like, if there was a regular auction house in ESO, I would use it. Crafters would get my business because I would use it. And it's so inconvenient not to have one, to spam in chat. I just don't even do it, right? So we have to have something. More than anything, it needs to be not just like easy, here it is in your face, but
but it needs to be intuitive, right? It needs to be something intuitive, that you're like, okay, I need my potions are running out. What am I gonna do? Oh, there must be a small shop that sells potions on this keep that is on the frontier of the fight. So I'll go take a look, and then you go, and there is, and then you buy it from whoever, But when you have a chance, you were like, okay, these potions are just because mine were running out, and I kind of need it, so. Now I want to buy my real potions, so you go to the potion guy who crafts a bunch of stuff, and you talk to him, and you buy a bunk of potions so you can use over time. I mean, there are different needs that the players have, both fighters and crafters, and those needs can be satisfied depending on where you are and what you want, right? And that's logical in my opinion. What they can't do is make people run back to the city every time they want something, or make it so selling or trading outside of the city or in any place is so boring and takes so much time, and it's so it's not fun, and then nobody does it. So like you can't do it, right? So that's what they got to be careful.
That's why you have the player the player-based vendors. For example, a crafter that actually wants to risk his wares and his ass going to the FOB for a siege. He can go there. Sieges, from what we know, are going to be huge. You won't have just one guild. You'll have a lot of people, even individuals, who will go there, and they need emergency supplies. You set up shop there, and you can sell even for higher prices right there, so they don't have to travel anywhere. But you're at the risk of getting killed and losing some of your wares, maybe.
Yeah, I think
if
there's
they,
one thing that can really help with this, and one thing we also have to keep in mind for this. One, I think what can help is a good social system. You know, if I have a friends list where I can put people and I can add like notes to them, you know, I can go, Chris, add a note. He makes my potions. I could go, I know Chris makes my potions. I can go to Chris to get my potions. Then I don't have to run around. I've already got a guy that makes potions, and, you know I can get them for a good price. The thing we also, I think, have to keep in mind is I don't really think we're going to be spending tons of time running from the battlefield back to town to get things, and then spend tons of time going, oh, where do I want to go? And okay, now I got something, I'm going to leave. I'm going to come back later in the day and get some more supplies. Because one, you're going to be able to do popcorn crafting. You can kind of keep yourself supplemented with arrows and things like that. Two, we only get rewards for our daily activities once a day when the server restarts. That's when you get all your money and resources. So that's going to be when you get on after getting that. That's probably when you're going to be buying your stuff. So you'll go once after you get all your resources. Then you'll go buy your supplies and your craft and whatever items you want. Then you'll leave. You do it all. You'll probably be doing it mostly all at once because you only get your rewards once. You don't go grind for an hour and then go, I got 100 gold. Time to go buy more stuff.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many ways this could go, right? But I mean, overall, we want it to be meaningful and interactive, right? We want it to be cool. You go to Bazaar, you got this thing, but it needs to be intuitive. Like you said, Alistair, it needs to not be a pain in the butt. It needs to make sense. Let me ask you guys, I mean, we saw a little bit of what Mark has said. We've talked about it. And of course, there's so much more that could come out. We didn't even talk about how you can put souls into your items and your weapons. If you kill someone, you might get a piece of their soul. You put it in their weapon, and then when you're around, it's like the Hobbit, right? When there's goblins around or whatever, orcs around, that glows blue, right? You might know when this person is around you, right? Might give you some power. We didn't talk about the ear system. That's the action, interaction, reactive system where you can engrave your armor like to be fire resistant, and if someone hits you with a fireball, your armor like flares up and it like protects you, and people can see in game that guy's resistant to fire. And this is all stuff crafters can do, put their name on stuff, right? I mean, there's so much stuff. Let me ask you guys, though, before we run out of time, we've talked about it a little bit. We know kind of what's going to be in the game. What are your two things? What are you most concerned about, and what are you most excited for the crafting NCU? Alistair, go ahead.
Honestly, I'm the most excited about the potential that it has to interact with the RVR system. Crafting is RVR. So, like we were talking about the shops and everything, I'm excited to hear stories like, oh man, they were attacking. I heard that they were going to siege that big keep from the enemy, and they started attacking it. And I was there, well, I'm going to set up a shop here because these people are going to need some supplies. And then, that person sets up a shop right, behind the enemy lines, on a safe zone where he can sell his stuff, so people don't have to go far away, and they can go there and buy siege and ammunition and whatever it is. And he sets up shop there, and then the siege goes for like an hour, and then this guy's like rezzing his Vox there, like, I'm gonna place my Vox here to make more stuff because what I brought is not enough. And then he just starts crafting stuff on the spot there to, so people telling these stories like, like, oh man, he's rezzing his Vox. That's just insulting. Let's go, break that. And things of the sort, having this interaction of the crafters making siege and making potions and consumables and all kinds of stuff that the PvP folks are going to need is what I'm looking for the most, to see how the system actually not only is important to PvP, is the reason to PvP, because that's how they're selling it. So I want to see how they're going to pull it off, because I've never seen something like it, So that's what I'm most excited, and a little bit worried too, but mostly excited about, because there's so much potential. They could do pretty much anything with it.
All right, Chris?
Well, my first worry is what we talked about last is the way they're gonna set the selling without the auction house, how things are gonna be done, and I'm also confident that the community, whatever shortcoming the system has, the community will make up for it. Like for example, the NPC I talked about, there can be a player that actually takes time to run around and list who sells what and sells the info himself. And then what I'm really the most excited about is just a little sentence Mark did in one of its comments is no recipes. Recipes is for cooking, not for crafting. So I'm really excited to see what they're gonna come up with no recipes. So what does that mean? How are they gonna implement that? But that means also that there's going to be a need for real dedications from the crafter. It's not going to be just a staple that anybody can do. And really, what I really, really hope is that making a crafter bot, a crafter alt, and having a crafter bot will be useless because you wouldn't be able to dedicate enough time and effort on it to actually make it useful, which means crafters and not just bots are useful and are important.
All right, awesome.
I have to copy paste what Chris just said. The thing that we didn't really get to cover, but I am really excited about, is the idea that crafters can really kind of not completely control what they're making. You know, there are some sort of kind of recipes to it, but you know, they can really customize and control the different elements that they want. What, you know, everything that goes in there, they can control the weight or the damage of a sword. You know, they can min max for other people. And what I'm most worried about is placement, how they're compensating for the lack of auction house. I mean, I think that's going to be a really serious thing they kind of need to work on to get
Definitely.
right.
Yeah, I'm still not sure how I feel about it looking like a giant pipe organ. I like how it's customizable. I like how you can move it around. We'll see. It looks kind of cool. I don't know. We'll see. I don't. Any final thoughts from you guys? Anything we missed? We wanted to hit on. Again, everybody, I mean, watching. This is just the little ideas of things they think they're gonna do. We're getting closer. We were like, I don't know, a year and a half or so from launch. We're gonna get some more information, but I think it's going to be awesome. Alistair Velik, you guys, any closing arguments, thoughts, concerns?
I think there's going to be a crafting system for very dedicated people, and I think it has a lot of potential to be awesome.
Definitely a lot of potential.
And I want to petition Mark Jacobs to let me craft a male bikini for my character.
Yes, let's get that.
All right, well, we will leave it there. Everybody, thanks so much for watching the Veilcast. We'll be back next week with episode number 4. You're not going to want to miss it. We're super excited for this game. We wish CSE all the luck, and we'll see you next week.